It's another Football Friday on News OK Live. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, hanging out with our staff, columnists Berry Tramel and Jenni Carlson, and beat writers Gina, Mizell, who covers Oklahoma State, and Jason Kersey, who covers the Sooners. We're talking about a couple 2:30 tilts in the state of Oklahoma on Saturday. In Norman, it'll be Oklahoma against Baylor, but we'll start in Stillwater, where Oklahoma State faces West Virginia, and Dana Holgorsen, who built an offensive juggernaut in Stillwater, only to go to West Virginia and bring back with him a defense that has all kinds of problems. Guys, every one of you picked the Cowboys to win Saturday in Stillwater, even though we have no idea who will be quarterbacking the Cowboys. What does that say about Holgorsen's past and his immediate present? Barry, I'm starting with you.
Well, this is all about West Virginia's defense and lack thereof. They haven't won since November 6th. Which is now, 6 weeks? They haven't won in 6 weeks.
You mean October 6th?
What did I say?
November?
Yeah. They did not play on Wednesday night. So, but anyway, although frankly ESPN had put it on TV if they would. This is a team in free fall. This is a team that was top 5. Geno Smith Heisman favorite. And all of a sudden, they just can't win. Lost at home last week to TCU. And Clint Shelf showed us last week that, Cowboys go 3 deep at quarterback.
Gina, is this a better sign for what Holgorsen left in Stillwater, or a worse sign for what he has to deal with in Morgantown?
It's probably a little bit of both. I mean, I'm with Barry in that the reason behind my pick is mostly because I think Oklahoma State plays more defense than West Virginia, which isn't saying too much, but I do think the Cowboys' defense is better. But to go back to kind of your original question about the legacy that Dana Holgorsen left in Stillwater, which is something that we've written about already several times this week and we'll write about tomorrow, is that, his system, you used the word in our staff meeting on Wednesday that I'm going to steal and use in my story for tomorrow, is that it's a resilient offense. And that sounds like a kind of a strange adjective to use, but I mean, when you look at what's happened to the Cowboys this year, they lost 2 first-round draft picks. They've had a quarterback carousel with 3 different guys. They've had their best playmaker at wide receiver get hurt for a significant amount of time and might be out for the year, and Tracy Moore. And here the Cowboys are still ranked in the top 10 in the country in pretty much every offensive category. So I think that says a lot about Holgorsen's system and just how effective it is. And I think we'll see that on Saturday. And now, Holgorsen's next challenge as a head coach is to try to him and his coaching staff have to come up with a game plan to try to stop this offense.
Wow, that's a good angle. I'm glad you're writing it. Jenni?
Funny how it works out, right?
Yeah. You've added some context that I really hadn't thought about. In fact, it's easy to forget, as explosive as the Cowboys are, those first-round draft picks that are playing on Sundays now. Jenni?
Yeah, those 2 guys are important.
Jenni, I'll go to you. Is the Cowboys, what you saw from Shelf Saturday night in Manhattan kind of left you a little fired up. It seems like you think he can handle the job going forward.
Oops, there we go. I'll get myself unmuted.
Come on in the house.
I am fired up about what I saw out of Clint Shelf. I think he played better than I ever imagined he would. And that was on the road against the number 2 team in the country. And I've said it for a long time. As good as K-State's offense is, and as ballyhooed as Colin Klein is, and I'm right there with everybody else believing how good he is and how good they are offensively, that K-State defense is pretty darn good too. So the fact that Clint Shelf was able to come in and play as well as he did, he matured right before my eyes. Now maybe he was that way before, but I just really felt like he played so much better than I thought he ever would, given that situation, coming in cold off the bench like he did. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if Wes Lunt's going to be available or if they're going to go with Clint Shelf, but at this point, I feel like their chances are solid, whether it's Clint Shelf or Wes Lunt. Long term, it's obviously Wes Lunt, but short term, I think Clint Shelf could do the job this week and maybe in the next few weeks. If he has to finish out the season, I'm not sure anybody would have any qualms about that.
As we said, we plan on showing up at Saturday morning an early afternoon with really no idea who's going to play. So I ask you for a prediction here rather than to break a news. Feel free to break news if you can. But Gina, who do you think will start for the Cowboys on Saturday?
That's the magical question. I feel like it's been the magical question for several games this season. My gut, for whatever reason, tells me Clint Shelf will start this game. Now, granted, Todd Monken and Mike Gundy both said that Wes Lunt was going to practice this week, but we don't know what capacity that entails. Does that mean he's out there running the first team reps, or does that mean he's out there, just with the guys and throwing around and that sort of thing? So, just based on, again, we don't know for sure what the injury is, but it's an apparent head injury. Just how dazed he looks. You can look at our photos from the Oklahoman and video footage that's been captured. He looks pretty out of it on Saturday. So, just based on that, I just think that maybe Clint Shelf plays in this game. But certainly with how crazy this quarterback carousel has been, I would not be surprised to see, J.W. Walsh come, save the day from his season-ending knee injury and start this game. I'm just kidding there, of course. But, nothing would surprise me. But I tend to lean more toward Clint Shelf. Certainly wouldn't be shocked if Wes Lunt's the guy on Saturday.
Barry, have you ever seen a quarterback situation like OSU has dealt with this season?
Yeah, OSU actually had one like this back in the 70s with Scott Burke and Harold Bailey and whoever else was having to go in. But to me, it's a great sign for the offense that all three of the guys have shown they can produce. I sort of think Lunt will be the quarterback. I'm just guessing like everybody else. But Boone, I talked to Boone Pickens this week. He says he has no idea, but he's guessing Lunt, so I'll stick with Boone.
Jenny, what's your guess? She needs to unmute.
I'm faking myself out here. Can you go against Boone? I'm not sure that's a good idea when you're talking OSU football. I'm with Gina, though. I think Clint Shelf is going to be the guy on Saturday. Concussions are tricky, and, it didn't – obviously, Wes Lunt played after he suffered the concussion. But, yeah, if he's throwing up on the sidelines and as dazed as he did look, he needed help to get off the field, help to get off the sideline to the locker room. To me, that's a sign that this is, something that may take a little while to come back from. And you don't want to mess around with concussions. Nobody's messing around with those things these days. So I think if there's any question about him, I think they go with Shelf. And I think they're fine with Shelf. West Virginia's defense, I'm sorry, Joe DeForest, it stinks. It's terrible. So I think Clint Shelf would do a fine job against West Virginia defense.
We'll go one more with a straight OSU topic, and then we'll bring in Jason with a crossover. But there's much at stake Saturday in Stillwater. It's old home weekend away for Dana Holgorsen, but also on the line, who has the most resilient lettuce? I'm talking about hair here. Mike Gundy's spike porcupine look, or Dana Holgorsen's untamed wildness? Jenny, who you got in the hair battle in Stillwater?
Oh, I was afraid you'd come to me first on this one. Golly, it looks to me like Holgorsen may be losing his hair, like it may be thinning and fading away. So I give the edge to Gundy. He's shown no signs of losing his hair. He may cut it from time to time, but he's still got it.
Barry, Gundy's got the most, it's amazing. He puts all that product in his hair, and it's still standing strong. That's what happened to me, I'm pretty sure.
Hey, that's why it's standing strong.
I asked Barry if he ever uses product in his hair the other day. Barry, what'd you say to that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Barry, you got a little Holgorsen look.
I'll go with Holgorsen. The natural look is my way. I'm big on the natural look.
Gina, who you got?
I'm like Holgorsen. I comb my hair once a day, whether it needs it or not.
This all was a setup so you could say that. We would want you to say that on camera for 5 years. Gina, who you got?
Well, I haven't seen Holgorsen's hair in person before, so I feel like I don't quite have the correct judgment as some of my esteemed colleagues do. But, Yeah, Gundy's hair, it's pretty impressive how precise the spiking is. And I over the summer, I went to the annual Football 101 for Women clinic, and Gundy speaks at the end of that event. And of course, you know, when you have a bunch of women in the room, that's one of the questions that comes up is how he does his hair. And kind of hearing how it is a routine, and if somebody in the house like calls him to do something, he goes, "Hang on," and has to finish his hair before he can do anything else. That cracks me up. So I guess I will go with Gundy, but maybe if I see Dana Holgorsen in the flesh, in close up in person on Saturday, maybe I will change my mind, but I will go with Mike Gundy for now.
So while I laud you for your Saturday advance angle, I'm going to have to give you a couple demerits for not getting that anecdote in the newspaper when you heard it the first time.
By the way, I have never told anybody, stop, I'll be there in a second, I have to finish my hair. I've never, ever said that to anyone, just for the record.
Jason, I'm guessing.
I guess you don't have the gel in your hair, so that's kind of the wash.
That's true. That's true.
Jason, I'm guessing you and I have never had to say that either. I'll speak for myself. But I will say this. If this conversation where we're talking about golf surfaces, Gundy is a well-manicured fairway. I'm going to say Holgorsen is sort of the dunes, and you and I, sidewalk or parking lot. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, you're right. I think you're right.
Okay, here's the crossover topic, guys. Barry, if you're looking for a subject for a Sunday school sermon on sticking with it and never giving up, and you had to pick from one of the state football programs for a subject, who would you pick? Chelf or our man Brendan Clay, who 3 or 4 weeks ago you termed the least productive running back in OU football history? Who gets the stick to it award for you?
Well, I'd probably go with Clay because Shelf, being a senior, didn't have a lot of options. I mean, he could have gone down to a lower classification, I think. But you know, Clay, I guess, could have transferred and gone to a Division 1A school and played 2 seasons. I'd probably think of somebody you know, I'd probably go with Kai Staley if I was picking somebody off either roster. But if you make me pick those 2, I'd probably go with Clay.
This is my way of trying to introduce an OU topic. Jason, talk about Clay and how he stuck with it. Here's one more season where Bob Stoops and Cale Gundy apparently have run through their list of running backs and now stumbled on a guy that we had either forgotten or not even thought of.
Yeah, Brendan Clay really did stick with it. You know, he's a guy I think who's always been a good teammate, never complained. It doesn't sound like never been a problem for them off the field. But he's a guy who was never productive enough to justify keeping on the field. And there were always people who came in, you know, Dom Whaley last year, Damian Williams this year, who came in and kind of took the carries that might have been his. But no, he stuck with it, and he had a great game last week, and it looks like he might have finally emerge. But to answer your question, I think Clint Shelf would be a better lesson because, I mean, this is a guy who has been with the program and he was, you know, buried on the roster beneath 2 freshmen. And at least with running back, you can get on the field sometimes and get carries. You know, when you're the 3rd string quarterback, this is what it takes to get on the field is the 2 guys in front of you have to get hurt.
We're talking about the never give up guys that we profiled in the Oklahoman this week. Clint Shelf at OSU, the quarterback who's now in line for playing time, maybe to start on Saturday in West Virginia. We're talking about Brendan Clay, the running back who's emerged, had his big breakout game, 157 yards, and a great performance at Iowa State. You're watching the Football Friday Hangout with us on News OK Live. And now, Gina, I'll ask you that question, but wasn't Shelf, in effect, told to, go find something else to do? He was told he's not going to play, and it seemed like what Monken and maybe others were saying too, it'd be better off for you and everybody if you moved along.
Well, I think what Monken was trying to say there was that, what, if you're Shelf, what the 3rd string reps entail. You know, he only gets about, I think, 3 reps during, the team period, and it's going to be with third-team guys. So you're only getting 3 reps, where the guys in front of you, whether it's J.W. Walsh or Wes Lunt, are getting way more than that, and you're not playing with the starting, receivers and the starting O-line, and so, you're not going to look as good. So, Monken kind of said that, usually when veterans get put in that type of situation, either A, yes, they'll transfer and go somewhere else and play, or B, they'll kind of just, settle back and say, all right, I'm a third-team guy, and kind of, write out their scholarship and assume they're never going to get on the field. So, I think what Shelf did, and John Helsley, detailed this in his story earlier this week, which was excellent, was just how hard he worked during the offseason. And that sounds so cliche, but, he was out there on the Enid High School football field, and his older brother Colton, who obviously OSU fans know well from his Fiesta Bowl heroics, is out there running routes, and his mom is snapping him the football, and his dad's out there, and it was a whole kind of a family affair. So, he did what he needed to do during the offseason, and, he clearly believed, he told Todd Monken that he believed he was the best quarterback to lead this team, and he finally got a chance to show it in a real capacity, again, like Jenni said, against the number 2 team in the country in their house against a good defense. So, it is a good story to show that, hey, when you work hard, sometimes things do happen, and he got a chance. So, yeah.
Jenni, these are the kind of stories that are right in your storytelling wheelhouse. Which one would you rather write?
I think the answer to the question is pretty easy. I think it's easily Clint Shelf is one of the two that is most appealing, and I think most stick-to-itiveness in my mind. It's different for a quarterback. Here's a guy that it's one guy that plays, and obviously at OSU it's been multiple guys that have played this year, but that isn't usually the case. At running back, there's different guys get in different situations. You might have a chance to return kicks or punts. You might play some receiver, some different positions. But Clint Shelf, he knows it's usually just one guy. And I think Berry might have said he's a senior. He's actually a 4th-year junior. So he could have transferred and played a couple years somewhere else, smaller division, but didn't, chose to stay, and is now on the field. To me, especially being a quarterback, that's where it elevates in my mind. But clearly, these are 2 guys that didn't bolt, didn't run, and in this day and age, we see it a lot. We see guys get stuck behind multiple guys in front of them, and they're out the door. So kudos to both of them for sticking to it.
We're switching gears, talking about Baylor, Oklahoma, 2:30 in Norman. And guys, I'll start with you, Berry. Can you think of a more costly loss in the Bob Stoops era than Baylor 45, OU 38?
I can think of about 10. How about USC? How about LSU? How about Florida? How about a game that cost them the national title?
Did anybody lose their jobs from any of those losses?
No, not that I'm aware of. But frankly, I think most OU fans would sacrifice a coach or 2 if it would give them a national title.
They've sacrificed 2 coaches this year, and they will not win a national title.
Yeah, I'm just saying, every loss in Soonerville is catastrophic. It means the sky is raining brimstone. But the truth is that was a bad loss. But in some ways, it was, it might have been good for the Sooners. It might have been the impetus for Bob Stoops to make some changes that needed to be changed. I loved Brent Venables, and I thought he did a very good job. But Mike Stoops has come back and done an excellent job and really improved the defense. So, if the Sooners had somehow got out of Waco alive, they would have went to Stillwater, ranked, 4 or 5 in the country, with a chance to win the Big 12, which they did anyway. But go to the Fiesta Bowl with a chance to play, Stanford in the marquee game. And guess what? That it got beat about 44-10 because they weren't as good as Oklahoma State last year. I think that just, what it cost them? That game cost Brent Venables his job, and OU its winning streak against Baylor. So, but on the other hand, it gave RG3 the Heisman Trophy. So it started a string of Heismans in the Big 12. Colin Klein might win it this year. give Cowboys Sooners a goal of making it 3 in a row in 2013.
Jason, as far as that game goes, it's being hyped on as, when's the last time a OU Baylor game in Norman was hyped for anything? But it's being hyped as a revenge game. It's also being hyped as a measuring stick for the Sooners. But do you think that's the measuring stick for how far the Sooner defense has come, or is West Virginia or OSU a better measuring stick for that unit?
Well, I think they're all good measuring sticks for the unit, but Baylor, Baylor has produced so much on offense, passing the ball, and they've, even in the games that they've lost, they've still produced fairly well through the air. So I think Baylor's a really strong measuring stick. I would probably say West Virginia is the best one, and that's only because it's on the road. I think that makes a difference. Bob Stoops' record on the road and his kind of struggles on the road have been documented. We've talked about that before, but I think that having to go on the road against an offense like that, especially if West Virginia is able to beat Oklahoma State and takes momentum into that game. But either way, I think that's maybe a better measuring stick, but they're all three good, and I think that loss last year was a very tough one for the program to go through, but I don't know that it was more costly, like Berry said, than the USC game, because that was just number 2 in the country with a chance to win the national championship and get embarrassed that way. I mean, at least OU was in this game to the very end.
Yeah. I don't remember anybody losing their jobs from that game. Just want to make sure I remind everybody of that. Jenny, here's my question to you. Revenge? Really? OU Baylor, and then the word revenge is floating around Soonerville this week. You buying it?
Maybe. I mean, I definitely think that has to be a game for the players that, sticks with them. Baylor went 80 yards in 5 plays with no timeouts in the final minute of the game. I mean, I would think for the defense, that would be a game that you'd look at and say, we want to try to rectify that situation. So, I don't know about revenge, but, clearly there's got to be some guys looking at this game differently than they would have looked at it, like Berry said, had they survived Waco last year. So I don't know if it's a true you can't measure it exactly, because obviously RG3 is no longer there. Nick Florence is pretty good, but he's not Robert Griffin III. So, you don't have the same measuring stick as you had a year ago. But clearly, I think that this is a game that Oklahoma wants to make sure they put any thoughts of this team being like last year's team to rest. And if you beat Baylor bad, that's another step in that direction. So, clearly, I think this is a game that Oklahoma wins easy. I don't know if they're thinking revenge or not, but clearly they want to reverse the outcome by a landslide this year.
Let's finish the OU Baylor topic on this. I'm looking at our picks here. Of course, everybody picked on our staff has picked the Sooners to win. The point total is 56-48, 56-52, and Jenny was the only one who got up in the 60s, 66. My question is, did she pick the point total high enough? Berry?
No, she's way smarter than the rest of us. After I sent that in, I regretted not going 70. Baylor twice this year has lost games in which it scored at least 50 points. Baylor's defense is awful. Landry Jones and those guys, Justin Brown, Kenny Stills, Sterling Shepard, Jalen Saunders, they ought to have a field day against that Baylor secondary.
Too late to change our picks. Jason, we're jumping to the other side of this equation. Is this a game where Landry Jones and everybody gets well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think this is the kind of game that, he can go out and put up big numbers, and the receivers can go put up big numbers, and it can really be a big confidence boost going into that West Virginia game next week. But I think I picked 56, and maybe I went a little bit too low as well.
Gina's on the low side of things.
I'm definitely too low, we'll put it that way.
48 points, and of course Jenny's 66. Jenni, you got a compelling reason why you went so high, and is there somebody on the Sooner sidelines that you're looking to just break out or have a huge game against Baylor?
Well, I think the reason I went so high is because I saw Baylor twice last year, and probably twice the year before that, and twice the year before that. I'm on the Baylor beat. When I'm not on the Kansas beat, I'm on the Baylor beat. Barry.
Hello.
I was at Baylor with you last year.
That's true. Okay. But no, their defense was bad last year. It's worse this year. So that considered, Oklahoma scored, was it 38 a year ago? And I think Oklahoma's offense is better this year than it was last year, and Baylor's defense is worse. So, and at home, I just think it's going to be a snowball for Oklahoma. But as far as a breakout game, I could really see, I think Jason's working on a story for tomorrow about the slot receivers. I could really see one of those guys having a big game against the Baylor secondary, a Jalen Saunders or a guy like Sterling Shepard. Obviously, we know Kenny Stills has played that position but has moved back outside more. So I could see either Saunders or Shepard having a big day tomorrow.
We'll get you out of here with this question. Mack Brown this week, in response to a question about a gesture that cost a Texas receiver 15 yards, and he was asked whether the upside-down hook 'em horn sign and what he thought of that. He said it was disrespectful, and he hoped that the Big 12 would take a look at it. My question to you guys is, was Mack right? Jenni?
Well, I mean, I think in the on the field in the game action, if a guy does something celebratory, whether it's that what he did was guns up and then he holstered them, so when you're doing that, when you're mocking the other team, that's a penalty. If a guy gets a sack and goes horns down, that I could see where that should be a penalty. But if he thinks it's disrespectful, guess what? It is. That's why people do it. That's why fans do it. So it should be a penalty in games if it's a mocking type of thing. But if it's on the sidelines after the game, before the game, out of the tunnel, I mean, I'm not sure you can change any of that.
Jason, is it disrespectful?
Well, yeah, I guess it is. I agree that if you're going to penalize one guy for making fun of one team's hand signal or whatever, you have to do it for everybody. You have to be consistent. Personally, I don't really think any of it's that big of a deal, and I don't think any of it should be penalized. But that's just my personal opinion. I think, but in Mack Brown responding to that direct question, he's right. If you're going to penalize his guy for making fun of Texas Tech, for mocking Texas Tech, you have to do it the other way too.
Gina, you were at a Holiday Bowl, and I'm wondering, were you ever cited making the upside down hook 'em horn sign? And if so, would you like to apologize right now to Mack Brown?
Guilty as charged. Yes, 2007 Holiday Bowl. Arizona State played Texas, and I was in attendance. Yes, I mean, I feel like disrespectful. First of all, you can't police what the fans do. The fans can do whatever the heck they want, and they have hand gestures often that are much more disrespectful than the upside-down hook 'em horn sign. I'll leave it at that. But I tend to agree that if you got to be consistent. If one team's going to get penalized, the other team should get penalized too. But if the opposing team is coming out of the tunnel, doing the upside down horn sign, or, do it on the sideline or after the game, like, how can you really police all of that? But if it's one guy after a big play does it, maybe. But I tend to agree that it's all kind of, none of it should be penalized. And I feel like disrespectful is kind of a strong word. Maybe I don't know what the correct word is, but disrespectful doesn't sound quite right, but I don't know. Well, I think consistency has to be key, and if that's what Big 12 officials want to do, then it's got to be consistent across the board.
Berry Tramel, as long as I've known you, I've never known you to make a hand gesture, let alone a disrespectful one. So I'll let you have the final word on this. Was Mack right?
Oh, I don't know if he's right, but I got the solution to the problem. If they outlaw it, here's what the coaches in the Big 12 ought to do. They ought to implement into their offensive system all these hand gestures that you signal to your offense when you're changing plays, instead of patting the head pointing a certain way. Just go with this as a certain formation type, and then put the onus on the officials. If they want to call you for calling a slant pass against a cover 2 defense, well, then we've opened up a new can of worms.
That's all for this edition of the Football Friday Hangout on News OK Live. For Berry Tramel, Jenni Carlson, Gina Mizell, and Jason Kersey, thanks for joining us.